My name is Amanda Ryle. I am one of the senior career coaches in the Career and Advising Center. And so we'll go over a lot of the services that we provide here today, but just know that I can be a resource for anyone and everyone should questions come up now or in the future about your application documents, this job search process, and pretty much if there's a question that relates to career, I'm going to do my best to answer it. Otherwise, I'll refer out to services or resources that can. And with me today is Jerry South. Jerry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Jerry South. I'm the Assistant Director for Career Coaching. We are here, again, as Amanda said, to help you with any needs you might have as far as career growth, development, document preparation, whatever the case might be, job search strategies. We're here to help you be as successful as possible and give you the tools to be successful. So very happy that you're here. I'll be moderating today. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. We'd love you to unmute your camera so you can see it during the presentation. It kind of helps us present a little bit more effectively. But we totally understand it's being recorded, as Amanda said, so it's totally up to you. But with no further ado, Amanda, congratulations everybody for being here. We're happy to have you and the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and get it started then. So as Jerry said, please ask questions as they come up. We'll keep this pretty informal, so don't hesitate to reach out either now or after with questions. Chances are if you have one or two other people in the same presentation have the same question. If I can transition through my slides here. There we go. So just a little bit on what we're going to cover today. We will go over some of the best platforms or some of the more effective platforms for job search. We will also go over hidden job market, essentially what it is and how to find it, which documents will be most likely to be used throughout your job search process, and then also how to effectively transfer your academic or research experience to industry job applications, and then a little bit about even kind of converting a CV if you have one to a resume if that's more appropriate for the position or positions that you will be applying for. So to get us started, this might be a review for some people who have been either connected with our office previously or that have done a lot of this job search before, but I just wanted to give you some of the more standard or some of the go-to job search platforms that are most commonly used when we're working with a student. So Careerlink is the first one that's listed here, and Careerlink is, as I have it on the slide, it's kind of NDSU's answer to the other job boards or the other platforms that are out there. The nice thing about Careerlink, though, is that it's a platform that is only for NDSU students and then also alumni for a lifetime. So should you graduate, find a job that you're really satisfied with and enjoy, and then decide you're going to do a pivot later on down the road, or perhaps you're just looking for another opportunity, you will always have access to this job search platform or this career management tool, as we sometimes coin it. And the reason that we refer to it as a career management tool is because there's a lot of different functions within it, not just finding a job or finding open positions. So some of those functions include maintaining your documents. You'll most likely be applying to positions through Careerlink where you would want to upload a resume or a CV or a cover letter, but this platform will actually store all of that for you as well. So it's very accessible no matter where you are, as long as you have that internet connection, you'll have the accessibility to your documents. And then in addition, you can do nice things like save searches. This is a function on other job platforms as well, but it's really customizable with our system where you can have as many save searches as you want to. So say, for example, maybe you're a graduate student currently, so you want to set up searches where the employers are only looking for graduate students. And then maybe you also decide, well, I want to keep my feelers out there, so to speak, and I want to know all the different opportunities that come in that might be applicable to me. And then you can even set up a save search that's just for your area of study in a bachelor's degree or something like that. So it's very customizable, and you can always change or add to those save searches. Indeed.com, I would say, is probably one of the most commonly known or utilized job search platforms that are out there right now. Indeed is a national job board, so it actually pulls from other job platforms that exist. So you might find that if you're looking on, I don't know, like monster.com, for example, or Simply Hired, some of those, you may find that the positions that are posted there are also on Indeed, because that's how it gathers the job postings for your view. The job board here, you are most likely to find positions that are here in the US, but it does also have some international opportunities, especially for the companies that maybe have some basis here in the US, and then also branches outside of it as well. Are there any questions up to this point on Careerlink or on Indeed.com? Alrighty, then I'm gonna just keep moving. And I can talk a lot and I'm very good at rambling, so I won't stop unless somebody stops me. So please do, if you have a question, I'd be happy to elaborate on any of these or give further detail and context. So a couple more of our kind of go-to industry job search platforms would be Glassdoor.com and LinkedIn. Glassdoor, I most commonly will use or will refer a student to if they're looking for an idea of what to expect in an interview. So Glassdoor.com allows those who have an account to, again, kind of customize it with some of the save search things, but you can also then go in and fill in historical data or information about positions or companies you've already applied with, or even provide reviews on companies you've already worked for. So in my specific situation, I'm a current employee of NDSU, so I could go in and I could provide a review on the position that I have or of the CEO, who I suppose would be President Brashani, and then also for the other companies that I've worked for, something similar. There is also, like I mentioned, kind of that, that cluster of interview questions or sample interviews. And that's really nice for, like I said, if you're not sure what to expect, but you say want to apply with Stanford in their lab in some specific role, you can go on and see if anyone who's already gone through that interview has provided information on what the interview question was that they got, how they answered it. You can also then include information on the type of interview that it was. So if it was a panel interview, how many people were there, what were the nature of their position, so on and so forth. So a lot of good historical data is collected there on Glassdoor. LinkedIn is another very commonly or well-known platform, but I think it's not as commonly used for job search. So I certainly refer students to this one because there are plenty of job postings that are out there. Companies will have their own LinkedIn pages where you can do a lot of that research that you would do, say, as you prepare to go into a fair or into a job interview. So it's got a lot of that great data and information right there. But for students who maybe don't necessarily know what they can do or what they want to do, or I work with a lot of international students as well who aren't entirely sure who will sponsor them, or even the companies who have an awareness of what sponsorship is. And we will use the alumni tool on LinkedIn for kind of getting an idea of the companies that are likely to hire NDSU students, or to get an idea of the different job titles that NDSU students have attained following graduation. So we have a video that's on our website, which Jerry, if you can hear me, if you could please find that, it's the YouTube video on exploration, the less commonly known tools. And one of the tools that's on there is the LinkedIn alumni tool, and it'll walk you through how to utilize the alumni tool in that function on LinkedIn. There's also a lot of recruitment that happens on LinkedIn. So this is very much so a two-way street where recruiters have their own kind of account set up where they can cast a net for all those who have, say it's a different keyword or educational experience or work experience on your LinkedIn profile. They can do searches for that and again, kind of cast that net and then pull people in that they want to reach out to for specific positions they're trying to fill. So then with that, I would also encourage everyone who has a LinkedIn profile just to make sure that it's up to date. It's as professionally complete and put together as possible, because recruiters are out there and they certainly do look at those LinkedIn profiles. And now again, I've rambled quite a bit. So are there any questions that have come in, Jerry, or anyone care to unmute themselves and get any questions answered?
No questions in the chat so far.
All right, thank you. And seeing no other questions yet, we'll keep moving. So some of the other resources that we commonly would refer to are on our website. Some of the same ones that you've already just been exposed to here in the presentation, but some of the other ones might be more local or federal government job boards, or, and again, I know this is an industry job search workshop, but for those of you who may also be considering roles in academia, There are some job boards that are listed or included there too. So I have a link on here. I know it's not clickable, but Jerry perhaps can provide the link to that. But that is that page that has the job search engines and then some tips and tricks for navigating and customizing those. And then another resource that I will always highlight, and I love to highlight, is the fact that this is what our staff is here for. If you're struggling a little bit or you're looking for something that's like a really tailored, customizable job search experience, something more than just a workshop, would highly encourage you to reach out to us either by way of appointment, and we're hosting or conducting, excuse me, those appointments virtually right now. We will go to some face-to-face in the semester as safety and regulation allows, but we will also continue to have that career studio, which some of you might be familiar with, where you can come into our space as your schedule allows to get questions answered, to have somebody assist you with walking through the system. And we will also have a virtual studio for the fall. We're not entirely sure what that looks like or hours of operation just yet, but what our intention is for there just to be an open Zoom link that no matter where you are, what you're doing, you could click into that during our operating hours, ask a quick question, or maybe even meet with someone one-on-one right then and there to do this job search or to work on your job search documents. And I didn't see anything come through the chat, so unless I'm mistaken, I'm gonna keep moving. So, the hidden job market. Excuse me. I think every once in a while we'll kind of hear this phrase and maybe not necessarily even know what it means, because truthfully, how can a job market be hidden? Everything is online, it's all real time. So it might be assumed that everything that's out there is out there for everybody to see. But the truth of the matter is that about 80% of jobs that are open, vacant, or in the process of being filled actually aren't even on job boards. They're not even, I don't know, I think they still put job postings in newspapers. They're not even out there in that obvious way. So it takes a little bit more digging on your part to figure out what these other 80% potentially, 80% of jobs that are out there. Now, granted, with COVID, with this virtual world that we're all very much so living in, that statistic might have changed a little bit, but the hope would be that if it's changed for the better. And I guess what I mean by that is it's so much more likely for individuals to connect with one another in this virtual space, or via a quick video call or a networking opportunity. So hopefully, because more of these are virtual, it means that they're far more accessible for you all as students, as those that are involved in teaching, research, whatever it might be. So then where do these positions hide, or where do these opportunities hide? As I kind of alluded to a little bit, this would be your current connections and your networks. So, excuse me, it might be that a friend of a friend is aware of a position in their company, or it could be that perhaps there is a research position that's coming up in the department and they're not sure that they want to post it. Some employers also try to steer clear of spending a lot of money on job ads because it can be expensive. Other employers still, they want to know who their friends, who their peers, who their competitors are maybe even likely to hire or likely to refer for a position. So not that there's a lot of theft of employee that happens, but I think you would be kind of surprised at the number of individuals that are kind of headhunted by even employers that are within industry. So just to include where some of those networks might be, that could be on or off campus, as I've already said, local, chamber, and local and national associations. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Chamber of Commerce, either in this area or in wherever it is you're originally from and where you might like to put some roots or find those full-time opportunities, would highly encourage you to seek that information out. Those chambers have websites where they have information about all the employers in those areas, so you can start doing a little bit of research and learn about the different types of companies that are within the industry that you have of interest. And then as far as those associations go, I'm sure many of you already know this too, but when you follow an association or when you're a member of one, there are different job boards and postings that might come through on a weekly or a monthly kind of a reminder schedule, or where you get those postings sent directly to you. So that takes a little bit of the hunting work out of it for you. And then it's also important to remember too that the opportunities, they may not even exist yet. So one of the points that I have on here is to make them happen. It's not very common, but I have certainly worked with students before who have come to me and said, hey, Amanda, I want to work with this company and I want an internship. And I remember one student specifically, I looked her in the eye and I said, that's great, but they don't have one. That doesn't exist. And she said, okay, well, how do we go about reaching out to this company to see if we'll create one? This student was also a first-year student, so she really kind of surprised me a little bit. But we kind of put together some questions that she could or should ask, ways to go about asking for some supervision in specific areas that she was interested in developing and growing. And lo and behold, she made an internship happen with this. Actually, it was even a government office that didn't exist. So those things can and do certainly happen. And then also for any students who are out there coming up on OPT, I've recently done a little bit of research and attended some webinars where they talk about how you can actually do some self-sponsorship. So it's maybe less common, may not pay as well as some other opportunities, but if it's something you're interested in, would certainly encourage you to talk to your advisor, or you can always reach out to me as well, and I'd be happy to talk through some of those strategies with you and what that documentation looks like for that as well. So then, as that last point alludes to, is how to inquire about these positions, just making sure these positions or these not yet created opportunities, I should say, is to just make sure you're being professional about it, knowing that if they don't have a position that exists that you're interested in right now, it might be for a reason. They may be in the process of eliminating a department, or because of funding things, or even because of COVID. Those positions may have just been minimized or even furloughed up to this point, so they might be in more of a hiring freeze phase as well. But
Great
there
question.
again, I talked quite a bit. Yes, please.
Yeah, so a couple questions came in. The first, pretty simple one, but just so to address everyone, sorry. Are the one-on-one services and other services available after graduation?
That's a fantastic question, yes. So we will provide all of the services that we typically would to any student to alumni who have graduated within the last 5 years. So we do have to put that limit or that cap on it just because our primary focus has to be serving current students. So the short answer is yes, and those appointments can still happen one-on-one, virtually, kind of however works best for the individual.
All right, excellent. And then the other question is, are the local chambers open to international students as well?
Yeah, so as far as becoming a member of your Chamber of Commerce, you can certainly do that, and you're able to do so as an international student. And I guess maybe what I didn't articulate very well here is that a good use of your local chamber is by getting to know the different employers or the different companies that are in your area or in the area you're interested in staying. So those chambers will have information about even networking events as well, where they might be bringing in employers of a certain sector, or they host a lot of professional development or community talks where maybe they're talking about diversity and inclusivity. It might be mediation in the workplace. So they have a lot of those different events that you can attend as a member or as a non-member, and you sometimes there for a fee. But at those opportunities, you can get to meet a lot of people that are in your industry and just learn a little bit more about the companies in your area in general. And were there any others, Jerry?
Nope, that's all so far.
All right, sounds good. We will keep on moving then. So, excuse me, the question of should I use a resume or a CV comes up quite a bit. For these industry positions, excuse me, you're most commonly to use a resume. So unless it's otherwise specified on the application materials that they're looking for a CV, it's pretty important to include a resume. What we know about employers and when they're reviewing resumes is that they usually give the document about a 5 to 10 second glance the first time before they determine if it's something that they're going to give more time and attention to later. So if you have several pages or a CV that's rather lengthy when they only wanted a resume, they're only likely to look at the first couple of sections anyways. So you want to make sure that you're using what they ask for, because it's also a great way to demonstrate to an employer that you don't follow instructions if you don't give them the application materials specifically that they're asking for. So the resumes are to be an abbreviated history, about 1 to 2 pages of information on your professional related experiences. So if you missed the workshop that we had last week on resumes versus CVs, bummer. No, I'm just kidding. We have a recording of that as well. And in fact, Jerry, if you don't mind sharing that, the link to that presentation, that would be great. Where we do talk a little bit more about the specifics within each different document. But the resume, again, is more of that abbreviated version, whereas the cover letter, a CV rather, would be more of a full history of your involvements up to that point. So we have that presentation that I mentioned and also resources on our website as well, if you're interested in digging into that a bit further. Cover letters commonly accompany a resume with application materials or when you're submitting applications online. So this is the chance to, before the resume, because they usually read the cover letter first, this is your chance to make that connection on more of a personal level with the company or with the position. So a resume is a lot more about here's what I did, how I did it, and what the result was, whereas a cover letter might be more about what brings you to that field of study, or why you're particularly interested in XYZ within the company. This is also when I would encourage a student to look up a company's mission statement or vision to see where that company intends to go. So the student or the individual can then talk about how that aligns with them and their own personal career goals as well. And Jerry, were those links that were coming through the chat, or were there any questions?
Links.
All right. Then to keep pressing forward here, I did mention at the beginning that we would talk about kind of converting those documents or how to get a CV trimmed down to a 2-page resume. And the reason that I have this as a focal point during this presentation is because I think typically when we're working with grad students and they've been focused in more of an academic setting up to that point, they're more likely to have a CV. And we want to get that content down to a 2-page resume, but a 1-page ideally, which I know kind of seems like a lot of work and like it couldn't possibly happen. But I've worked with individuals who have 10 or 11-page CVs, and we can get the content trimmed down to a 1-page resume if they really want to. It's a tough time, but we can get through it. It's just a matter of really going through and deciding what of the information in my CV does the employer or my reader need to know? Which experiences are the most relevant to the job I'm applying for? Which teaching involvement went over the same content area or the most pertinent content area that I have to list and I have to articulate it in a way where they see it as being valuable. So if you want any assistance with that, can't reiterate this enough, that's exactly what our office is there for. Even if you want to do that by email, if your schedule works better for that, we're happy to make that accommodation as well. And then as I had mentioned, you need to consider what the reader needs to know. And then a little bit of a tidbit on advice that I'd provide there too is just making sure that it's in a way that they understand. And we'll chat about that a little bit more here on the next slide as well. And then also for those documents, rather commonly we'll see that the references get included on the same page or on the tail end of a resume or a CV. And just a note that it should be on a separate page. It should be its own standalone document. And then we also have more information on our website for the layout that references can or could be in. This is always your choice, how your documents look. We just provide some feedback on industry standard or what's more common practice. So again, the information is on our site with an example of how that can look as well. All right. Keep going if my computer allows. There we go. So how you can go about articulating that value then. You want to be sure to avoid using technical jargon or acronyms. So that's what I was kind of alluding to, and I said you need to put it in a way where they understand and where they are able to see how valuable it is. So if you're using an acronym that's very specific to your area of study or your area of research and you're applying to a company within industry that's not likely to know that acronym, omit it or spell it out. And I think the best questions that I can ask a student when we're doing an interaction where we're converting that research or academic experience to what an employer and industry needs or wants to see is I will ask them, will the employer know what you're talking about? excuse me, if the answer to that is no, they probably won't, then there's some work we have to do. I also try to ask in a not too brash manner, will they care what you're saying here? So, and I don't mean that in a snarky way, but if you're saying something that's very specific to an area of study that you have or research that you've done, or a different industry even that's not theirs, will they be able to say, oh, okay, I can see why that's valuable and how it's relevant or related to this position? So kind of going through and asking yourself some of those questions as you're doing a personal review, or you can get a review by someone who's in that industry, from an employer that we collaborate with or that you're aware of in the community, or our office. You also will want to identify the transferable skills to be able to relate them to the job. So I guess, does anybody out there care to share their thought on what a transferable skill is, or provide a definition for a transferable skill? If I had the Jeopardy background music, I would play that right now. Okay, well, I'll just pretend that someone answered that it's a skill that is transferable from one job or one industry to another, and they were spot on correct. So those skills can be anything like attention to detail, the ability to communicate, the ability to provide leadership, managing individuals. It's all sorts of different skills kind of across the board. And those are the things that typically tend to be a little bit more difficult for an employer to train someone in on anyway. So it's very helpful if you can articulate those skills that you've developed through the different experiences you've had up to this point on a resume. And the National Association for Colleges and Employers, NACE, is where we typically get our most standard information, or where we get data on employment trends and recruiter college interactions on a national level. So Jerry, if you're able to find the link to the, I think it's even got like the top 15 transferable skills list that's out there, that will very directly tell you these are what employers are typically saying they're looking for, that they're not finding in applicants. So making sure that you're articulating those on the resume can really help you to stand out. And then you also want to utilize the position descriptions or the job postings. So this might sound like really obvious feedback, but every resume, and usually I get some scowls or eye rolls when I say this, but every resume and cover letter should be unique to the specific position you're applying for. So that doesn't mean if you're applying for a project manager at company A and company B, you can use the same or project manager resume. Rather, they should still be different, because every company needs something different out of every employee. So keeping that in mind and tailoring or targeting your documents is very important. You ever sit down to provide an hour-long presentation without water? Not a brilliant idea. So anyway, so some of the things that you're doing with that position description or the job description is to look for what skill sets they're saying they're looking for. Are they saying that they are seeking someone with a certain type of experience?
Question just came in as well. As far as the CV versus the resume, is it the formatting different as well as content, or is just the content different?
Now that would really depend, because a CV can be so lengthy, it's likely to have more sections to it or different categories of experiences. So in that way it would be different. Otherwise it can certainly be the same, like if you're talking literal formatting of what my margins are looking like, or what text is bolded, or my layout of where the dates or the city state locations exist on the document, that can always be different. We do just kind of recommend, I guess, if you're putting together a cover letter and a CV and references or anything like that, that you even use the same header though from one document to the other, so that it looks like a clean professional portfolio. And when the employer or recruiters are looking over your documents, it's really evident that they go together. And thank you. Oops. Thank you for that question. It was nice to have that little little break. So back to those position descriptions. Like I was saying, if the employer is saying they're looking for a skill set or a certain type of experience, and you're thinking, oh yeah, I alluded to that in the one section, or I alluded to that in a bullet point, you still might have some work to do, because I hope to not sound too calloused when I tell students, employers don't have time. They're not likely to guess or give you the benefit of the doubt. So if you say something kind of vague, they're not likely to say, oh yeah, well, I'm sure that when they were involved in that, they did X, Y, Z, which we need them to do in this role. You kind of need to spell it out for them if it's something you have direct experience with.
Another question related, as far as applying for the same type of position with two different companies, is that content and format different as well, or is it just how do you tailor between the two?
The formatting doesn't need to change, because the only time you're really changing the formatting super drastically is if you're applying for like different types of positions. So example, if you're applying for something that's in like a marketing role or very design heavy, you're likely to have a more visually appealing resume versus if you're applying for something in a different sector. So that's not likely to be the case. If it's the same position, but for different companies, again, formatting doesn't need to change, but what will change is the types of bullet points you're putting together. So if one company is really heavy on data collection and input, for example, or they mention it several different times, you want to make sure that you're touching on it. If another one is very similar, but they sneak in a bullet point about, oh yes, but you'll also be managing individuals, great. Then you have to sit back and ask yourself, where can I include some information about my supervision or managerial skills to make sure that it's tailored as specifically as it can be to this job? Are there any others there, Jerry?
No, that answered very well. Thank you.
Of course. Keep the questions coming. It makes it a lot more exciting when I know you all are out there and don't just have your screens turned off and taking a nap. So what students always ask us, they always want to know, how many jobs should I apply for at once? And the shortest answer I would provide is the number of which you can keep track of. Because if you find that you've got, 1,000 different hooks in the water and you're just waiting to see if anybody will bite, it's pretty hard to keep track of all of that. And it's also not likely that you're being that intentional. We have a resource on our website, which we call the job search log. And it's basically an Excel spreadsheet, but it's very pretty and it has different categories and headings already put in there for you to be able to track, here are the jobs that I applied for. I submitted it on this platform, or here was the password that I had to use. The application closing date is XYZ. I want to follow up with the recruiter on this date. So it just kind of helps you to organize all of that together. And now I've worked with some students who have felt pretty desperate. And so they say, well, I'm going to apply for as many jobs as I can. And then when I've asked them, how many of those jobs do you actually want? They'll give me a very small percentage. And that's kind of a bummer because it might be a waste of your time and a waste of the employer's time. Should you get the interview, or should they, go through the whole recruiting process and say, yep, this is the individual we want, only for you to say, yeah, no, thanks. If you want to get some experience interviewing in a certain industry or with certain types of employers, that's a different situation. You still can, and you can learn from them. Or you can always schedule mock interviews with our staff as well, where we will simulate the interview exactly how you would expect it from an employer with tailored questions, whether it's a panel, virtual, whatever it might be. We'll do our best to make it as lifelike as possible. How do I keep that information organized? So I already kind of alluded to that with the job search log. So you have those options. Otherwise, sometimes people feel more comfortable putting all that information like in an Outlook calendar. Again, the short answer there is whatever works for you. However it works to keep all of that data and information together. I would also recommend, though, saving copies of the resume, the cover letter, and the position description for every job that you apply for. Reason being is employers will commonly take that job posting down once the position is no longer open. So you want to have that just in case it's something you want to refer back to prior to an interview, so you can kind of brush up on specifically what it is they're looking for in a candidate, so you can make sure you're touching on those points in the interview. And then kind of similarly with a resume and cover letter, you want to make sure you recall what you said in case they ask you to elaborate on anything. And I never mean to scare students with this, but I once was in an interview. I made my resume, so I knew what was on there, but they sat me down and they said, okay, now we would like you to go through every single one of these jobs. Tell us what you liked most about it. Tell us why you left that job, and explain every bullet point that's on your resume. And it was just kind of like, wow, really wasn't expecting that. But had I had that document with me ahead of time and reviewed it, it probably would have felt a little less daunting. How and when is it appropriate to follow up? So again, we want to make sure we're following up and we want it to be done professionally. And there again, you want to demonstrate that you have the ability to follow instructions and pay attention to detail. So if the employer has indicated on a job posting that it would close on the 15th and today is the 16th, you can follow up after a closing date, but you might want to give them a couple of days to review the documents or to review all the candidates. If you're following up with them before the closing date, that might seem a bit pestering. And there again, like you maybe didn't pay attention to the details that were on the job posting in the first place. And the last one that's on here, this certainly aren't all the questions that we get. These are just some of the more common ones. But the last one here is, what if I get an offer while I'm waiting to hear back from my dream job? That's a really tough position to be in, but everyone is different. So the last thing we're going to do is tell you what to do. We will help you to weigh out the pros and the cons. Depending on the industry, it might be that they have very few openings or that we know that there's a more competitive time for the job market than others. So we'll share all that information that we do have about the nature of the position and industry you're applying for. But we've seen it where people have turned down that position that they were offered to wait for their dream job only to find out that they did not get it. And on the flip side, we've heard from students who have taken the job, started it, then got the offer from the dream job, and then quit that other job or had to turn down the dream job. So we want everybody to do what's best for them, and we certainly don't know the answer to that, but we'll help you to kind of piece through the information or piece through everything to make sure you make the best decision for yourself.
Got a question that came in from the previous slide. There was a statement on there that says how to fill in the gaps. Can you discuss how to see the gaps? Like the very last bullet there, it says how to fill in where to see gaps.
Yes. So with a position description, maybe they're saying that you have, or that they're looking for someone who has X number of years of experience in an area versus another. So rather than lying and saying you have supervision experience or that you have that specific type of experience they're looking for, you kind of want to ask yourself, how do I fill that gap, or how do I still meet the needs of that company or that employer without having that specific skill set? So maybe it's that you were able to supervise a project, or you were able to do something else that was kind of related to a supervisory role, like provide feedback, or maybe you got to carry through a new initiative. So you kind of have to pick through what it is you don't bring to the table and try to supplement with all of the pieces that are related to the skill set or the experience that you maybe don't have. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I have another question about that.
Please.
This is like a personal question. I have a gap from where I finished my master's and I've started my doctorate.
Okay.
So how do I did not really do anything productive related to the research or industry. So how do I project that gap?
Well, and I think the main thing is that there's people who have all sorts of different backgrounds, and they spend their time in very different ways. And some people who go to high school, their parents for X number of years, and then they go back to school. So there's no right or wrong way to do this. But certainly, like you said, you want to make sure you're still kind of articulating it the best way possible. So with that, I would say if there was any volunteer work that you were a part of, or any personal projects and things that you had done during that time that are related or relevant, you can certainly include those on the document. I've also worked in some of my previous work history. I worked with a lot of folks who did have those employment gaps. And what we would do is we would utilize what's called a skills-based resume. And I bet Jerry can probably provide a link for that too. And that's where, instead of listing out, here's the job I did, the date range in which I did it, and everything I did. Here was the next job I did, the date range and everything I did. Instead, you focus on different sections or kind of clusters of skill sets. So maybe it's technical skills and then data management skills, or whatever your area or industry might be. So you talk about all the skills first, and then underneath it, you sneak in, here was my job title, here was the date range, or here was my education and the date range. So you're trying to draw the employer's eyes to everything you do bring to the table that's relevant and related. And then at the end, the job titles and the date range are kind of like an afterthought. You're trying to sell them early on all of the relevant and related skill sets and experiences you bring to the table.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course, yes. And please don't hesitate to follow up if you'd like a little more discussion on that. I'd be more than happy to do so.
Sure, thank you.
And were there any other questions out there yet, Jerry?
Nope, no more.
Okie doke. So tricks to the trade. This might seem kind of, I don't know, obvious, I guess, but apply through the company's website when possible. So what we mean by that is where LinkedIn might allow you to do an easy apply option, or Indeed might say apply via Indeed. You can do that, but there's less guarantee that those application materials are, first of all, tailored, and then second of all, that they get to the company for the right or the accurate position. So with Indeed, for example, you can pre-upload a resume, and if you apply with that, it's probably not as tailored or as specific to the job or to the employer as it could be. So we make that recommendation. Again, you want to have your documents tailored and prepared, which that's not a huge shock there, and we've already talked about tailoring quite a bit. And then you also want to do your research before applying. So the research being that you want to know, again, does this company fit with where I want to go? Does this company align with my values and what I'm looking for in my professional career? Does it offer the type of upward mobility, or maybe it's even across departments? Maybe I want to try on a couple of different roles or a couple different positions, and I want to find a company that would allow me to do so. Want to do some of that research ahead of time, and that might happen by way of looking at the company's specific website, their social media platforms, or even reaching out to professionals that already work at the company, or fellow NDSU alumni who are there or used to work there, and so on. So reaching out to people who are in companies you're interested in is not at all a bad idea, and LinkedIn offers you a really easy, quick way to be able to do so as well. Whoops. So just wanted to add some don't forget information. So during the semester, our studio will be open from 8 to 4, and that is in Series Hall 306. But we will also have that virtual career studio that I had mentioned. More information on that to come, and just keep an eye on our website, or feel free to reach out at any time, and I'll get you updated on what we have for that. And then we also have the assistance via email or Google Forms. So on our website, if you're looking up some of the tricks or the information on resume or CV or cover letter, there's a link on those pages on how to submit the documents for review, or you can send to our department email address, which I think I have, yes, on the next slide. And then you can also set up video and phone call appointments at this time while we are still primarily working off campus. And everybody in our office has that availability. If you're interested in an appointment, again, you can reach out via email, and we'll be sure to help get you connected. And then lastly, there is some of our information. So again, we are located in Series Hall 306 up on the 3rd floor, and our website is listed there as well. If you prefer our phone number, you can call, but I'm sure you'll get a much quicker response via email, and we can make sure you get to the correct person or the best staff member for your questions. So with that, more questions.
So at this point, you feel free to type any questions in the chat if you'd like, and I can relay them, or if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and do that and ask now.
This might look silly, but do you guys charge for taking these advice?
Oh, that's not a silly question at all. And all of our services are free of charge to students. It's actually built into your student fees. So I kind of joke with people, it's silly if you don't work with us because you're already paying for it. So please do.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
And that goes for the alum as well, up to 5 years after. Those are still free services as well.
Any other questions? The questions so far have been great. I'd love to answer more. Otherwise, if there are none, that does conclude the presentation. And like I said, once we have this video or this recording on YouTube, I'll be sure to send out the link to all of today's participants. And again, thank you for attending, and please don't hesitate to reach out in the future.